What is going on, New York Giants fans? Welcome to another video from Hit Squad Productions. And in this video, I wanted to look at Joe Judge's first year as our head coach. I wanted to look at the positives and the negatives, as well as give my overall opinion as to where I think that the New York Giants are headed towards. Now, despite Joe Judge having a 6-10 season, this team didn't feel like a 6-10 team. At least at times. When you look at the Giants, they were definitely an interesting team, right? There was definitely strides where they looked like the best team in the NFC East, and I think that going forward that they will be a very competitive team. But then you also had moments where it looked like this team never practiced before. So, I think that falls into a lot of different things. I think that also falls into, these players are very young. We have the second youngest roster in the league. They're growing with each other. We didn't have no proper OTAs. They had to kind of learn on the whim. We had offensive linemen rotating, which isn't too common, but it ended up working out. Now, looking at Joe Judge, when we hired him, no one knew who Joe Judge was. No one knew who he was at all. No one wanted to give him the time of day. No one wanted to even put faith in the man, which is kind of crazy. Now, when we hired him, you had people in the media saying that this was a bad hire, this was a rush hire. They were already labeling him as a Belichick failed coach without him even having a proper press conference. It was ludicrous. It was insane. And fast forward to 2021, I don't think that anyone would have anything negative to say about it. Now, looking at Joe Judge, look, I thought he had a solid draft as his first year as the head coach. You get Andrew Thomas, you solidify the left side. He looked like he was becoming, that number 4 overall pick that we selected. Xavier McKinney looks very promising. He was a safety we drafted in the second round. Matt Parrott, I know a lot of fans wanted to see more Matt Parrott this year, but he looks pretty promising. Obviously, I think that, the New York Giants may keep Cam Fleming just as a rotational piece, but Matt Parrott definitely shows some promise. I think definitely the surprise pick, in my honest opinion, that ended up playing the best out of all of these players that we drafted was Darnay Holmes. I thought Darnay Holmes was one of the best slot cornerbacks in the league this year, especially for a rookie. I don't think he let up a single touchdown. I know that he was injured down the stretch, and we saw Xavier McKinney kind of play that slot role, but Darnay Holmes shows a lot of promise. Now, we drafted guard Shane Lemieux out of Oregon in the 5th round. Shane Lemieux was an interesting signing, considering the fact that, we had Kevin Zeitler, we had Will Hernandez, we didn't know what that meant. But you saw down the stretch that Will Hernandez was benched in favor for Shane Lemieux. And that's not looking too good. But Shane Lemieux really helped solidify the left side of the offensive line. So I got to give Joe Judge a lot of credit for finding some talent in the rough. We drafted Penn State's linebacker Cam Brown in the 6th round. He looked okay throughout the year. We drafted Minnesota linebacker Carter Coughlin in the 7th round. I thought Carter Coughlin was pretty solid throughout the year. We got TJ Brunson. We didn't really see him too much. We also got Chris Williamson. We didn't see him too much either on the field. And Tay Crowder in the 7th round, Mr. Irrelevant. Tay Crowder actually is looking like a pretty solid linebacker next to Blake Martinez. But I do want the Giants in the offseason to address the linebacker position because while Tay Crowder has kind of immersed himself as a pretty solid pick, we need help at that position because if he goes down, then we're stuck with Devontae Downs, who he shouldn't even be on this roster going into the next season. Now, looking at Joe Judge, look, no one wanted to give this man the benefit of the doubt. And before I even go into it, because I could talk for so long about how no one wanted to give this coach the benefit of the doubt, I thought it was very interesting the way that he approached the Giants organization. I think it's worth noting that outside of Jason Garrett and Mark Colombo, who isn't even here anymore, every coach that Joe Judge has hired with this organization, he's had prior work experience with at some point in his career. And I think that's worth noting because under Pat Shermer, none of the coaches he hired he had previous work experiences with. In my honest opinion, when you're running an organization or any business, I think familiarity, compatibility, and being on the same page are some of the keys to building a strong foundation. And if you're Joe Judge and you're trying to build a winning culture and something that can sustain long-term success, you need some of those keys to build that foundation. And I think that he hit the nail on the coffin. I'm very excited with what Joe Judge has done. You look at these hires that he made for these coaches, and I don't think any of these were any bad hires. Now, obviously, I don't think Mark Colombo and Jason Garrett were a Joe Judge hire. I think that was more of a John Mara hire, more of a safe hire in my opinion. But obviously Mark Colombo's not here anymore, and we don't know what's the future for Jason Garrett, and we'll see what happens later in the offseason. Now, Joe Judge, he took on a young roster that was in the rebuilding process with a general manager that he didn't choose. Typically, when organizations clean house, they get rid of the general manager and the coach. They only got rid of Pat Shermer. They kept Dave Gettleman, and he'll be back in the 2021 season. But, that was definitely very strange considering the fact that Dave Gettleman was on the hot seat. Now, Joe Judge also had to deal with the pandemic, no OTAs and no preseason. Granted, I know everybody else had to deal with that, so you really can't give him much excuse there. But I thought I thought how Joe Judge handled the DeAndre Baker situation was phenomenal. You got to give credit to him and the Giants for how they handled it because they genuinely gave DeAndre Baker the benefit of the doubt. They waited till more information came out. They could have cut him the moment that this news came out and not give him the benefit of the doubt. But they stood true to their colors. They waited until it just became too much of a distraction and they let go of DeAndre Baker. But I liked how they handled the situation. I thought that they were, in the right for what they did. I think, it just got to a point where it was too much. And, Joe Judge already at that time had a lot to deal with. So, I completely understand. Now, looking at Joe Judge, you got to give him credit for what he's done with not just this roster, but just this franchise. This team could have given up at 1-7. We could have done what the Jags did, what the Jets did, but we didn't. Now, we pulled off something that, it looked promising. We went on a little winning streak. We looked good against Seattle, which was a playoff team this year. And then you had moments where, down the stretch, we're not scoring touchdowns. We're scoring 3 points, 6 points, and it's not winning us games. I said in my previous videos, you're not going to win games that way. You need to put points on the board. Regardless of whether Daniel Jones is in the game or not, there's no excuse for it. Now, I will say this much. This team was competitive week in and week out, and that's something that Joe Judge and Dave Gettleman did say that we will see on the field. And I'm very excited going forward where this franchise is headed towards because you're seeing that these players are growing with each other. They're learning. They're learning how to win with each other, and I think that's great. And I think that's only going to help these players improve. And, honestly, I think that's going to help build this foundation and winning culture that Joe Judge is trying to bring. Now, let's be honest, guys. There's still pieces that we need to this team. We know we needed an edge rusher. We need some wide receiver help. We need some linebackers. You heard Dave Gettleman and John Mara say that they're looking to add some playmakers this offseason, and we'll have a video talking about that in the future. Now, looking at this, let's be real. In 2020, the strength of this team was absolutely the defense. And you got to give credit to Patrick Graham for what he's been able to do with this young defense. I thought Patrick Graham was a solid hire by Joe Judge and was one of the coaches, honestly, that kind of had some question marks on him, right? Nobody knew if whether that was Brian Flores' defense or if that was Patrick Graham's defense. But I think Patrick Graham has solidified himself as a solid defensive coordinator. And if he keeps playing the way that he's playing, he may become a head coach in this league. And, hopefully, the selfish Giants fan that I am, hopefully he doesn't get that opportunity. Hopefully, we can lock him up the same way that we did this year. But I really like what Patrick Graham and Joe Judge did this year with this defense. They were working with young late round rookies, some undrafted players. They were dealing with, having to learn a new system. We had some free agent acquisitions who haven't had played with each other before in Logan Ryan, Blake Martinez, and James Bradbury, but they all have familiarity with the scheme and, obviously, the people here in the organization, and they ended up working out. I don't think that this is the same kind of a defense we saw in 2016, where it was just major free agent acquisitions that helped this roster. You saw help from all across the board. You saw it from the late round rookies such as Tay Crowder, Carter Coughlin. You saw it with Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence, and Dalvin Tomlinson. You saw even look, as much as I hate Devontae Downs, there were some plays where, he held his own and looked pretty solid, but there was also a lot of plays where, let's be real, he looked, he looked fucking horrible. Excuse my language, but I thought our secondary was very good. James Bradbury had a Pro Bowl season. He should have been All Pro, but he wasn't. He had a Pro Bowl season. Logan Ryan looked very solid. That was a great signing by Dave Gettleman, considering the fact that, he was one of the highest, free agent signings that you could get out there. And we got him on a cheap contract, and we ended up signing him for 3 years. And he played very solid at his first year at safety. Now, I liked what Patrick Graham was able to do with getting production out of Julian Love, who was a safety, Isaac Yadam, and Ryan Lewis at the cornerback two position. I think that you really just got to give a lot of credit to what this organization has been able to do with its young players and getting the most out of them. Now, granted, look, just because the defense was good, that doesn't overlook the fact that this offense was putrid. This offense was bad. We were the 31st ranked offense, and that cannot happen going into the 2021 season. We can make a case that Daniel Jones 100% regressed this year, and he didn't look like a franchise guy. He definitely took a lot of steps back from his rookie season, but he also took some steps forward. He improved in the fumbling part of his game. We saw the turnovers kind of decrease a little bit, but, we saw that he's a little bit more mobile, but we also saw that, he could still be the Daniel Jones that we know that could turn the ball over when the pot gets a little too hot, if you know what I mean. Now, looking at, Daniel Jones in his year, he was 280 for 448 attempted passes completed. He had 2,943 yards, which was 19th in the league. He had 11 TDs, which was tied for 29th in the league. He had 10 interceptions, which was tied for 18th in the league. He had a QBR of 61.7, which was 21st in the league. Now, granted, obviously, he ran the ball a little bit. He had 423 rushing yards on 6.5 yards per rush and one rushing touchdown. Now, granted, despite all of this, Daniel Jones had a bad season. Daniel Jones had a bad season and had many people like myself questioning whether, that was the right pick or not. And I know a lot of Giants fans were already iffy on the Daniel Jones pick. And I understand both sides of the coin. We have to wait to see what happens with Daniel Jones. Hopefully we can get him some playmakers and we can see a better product on the field from Daniel Jones for the sake of his own career. Now, I will say this much. What I like about this Joe Judge team is that they fight. And not just on the defensive side of the ball, but on the offensive side of the ball too. You saw Nick Gates really hold his own, and he was a tackle converted guard, converted into a center. And we got him on a very, very cheap deal, and he ended up looking like a solid center. This offensive line was young. We were rotating players. They were growing with each other. They weren't able to develop proper chemistry, and they kind of had to develop on the whim. And week in and week out, as soon as Joe Judge took control of this offensive line started to improve. Granted, I understand down the stretch, especially when you look at the Arizona game, this offensive line was horrible. You saw the offensive line take strides forward, but you also saw them take strides back. So hopefully, we can improve in that aspect going into it next year, which I think that we will. And I'm very excited to see what Saquon can do in the backfield. Now, looking at that, right? Let's look at Wayne Gallman. Wayne Gallman was one of the few players this year that absolutely stepped up and had a great year. Wayne Gallman had 682 rushing yards. He averaged 4.6 yards per carry with his longest run at 60 yards, which was against Seattle. He also had 6 rushing touchdowns and 1 fumble. Now, running the ball, the Giants averaged 4.4 yards per rush and had a total of 1,768 rushing yards and 13 rushing touchdowns. To me, that's kind of impressive when your star running back is out for the year. And you saw that, look, when Saquon went down, this team could have just lied down and quit, and they didn't. It was a next man up mentality that Joe Judge has been trying to establish, and you saw it pay off. You saw players like Alfred Morris and Dion Lewis join in on the action. Unfortunately, Devontae Freeman couldn't really be a part of that. He was injured for most of the year. But, you got to give credit to how Joe Judge had these players ready week in and week out. These players weren't playing one position; they were doing multiple things, and I like that. I like that because I think you're getting your players ready for any given moment and I gotta respect that. And I gotta respect the creativity from Joe Judge. Now, I thought the offensive line looked shaky at times, especially with our first round pick in Andrew Thomas. Obviously, we had the Mark Colombo situation, but looking at it, I think Andrew Thomas is coming along. We're gonna have to see how he plays out, but I think that he will have a strong sophomore year. Now, obviously, the team was very hot and cold, right? And it did seem that the team picked up towards the second half of the season. You saw the offensive line grow and get better. DJ looked better while still needed to improve in certain aspects of his game. And you could absolutely make a case again that he had a horrible year. I thought it was kind of interesting that, for me personally, I thought that this offense would be ahead of the game and the defense would have to play catch up. But that wasn't the case. Hopefully the offense can come to stride next year. We could see a good product on the field because if not, man, it's not looking good for Daniel Jones or Jason Garrett if we keep Jason Garrett. Now, I thought this was very interesting and worthy of bringing up. Look, our time of possession improved. It didn't improve by a lot, but it definitely improved. We were 28 minutes and 42 seconds this year, and last year, 2019, we were 28 minutes and 35 seconds. Now, again, when you have no wide receiver helps, obviously Evan Ingram ain't really helping you. Your star running back is out. To still average time of possession, to me, is very impressive. You saw that translate very well in games like the Seattle game, in the Los Angeles Rams game and the Tampa game. It translated pretty well. And that's something that the Giants are going to have to improve on going forward, as well as scoring touchdowns. Touchdowns as a whole, the Giants had 13 rushing touchdowns, 12 passing touchdowns, and 2 defensive touchdowns. Obviously, that needs to improve, especially on the offensive side of the ball. If Daniel Jones plans on being in this roster going into his 4th year, he needs to improve greatly and have even a better year than what he had in his rookie year. Now, the New York Giants finished the 2019 season 23rd in overall offense, 18th in passing, 19th in rushing, and that was out playing a single game with all of Daniel Jones's weapons and Daniel Jones being a rookie quarterback. This year, learning a new scheme under Jason Garrett, having pretty much the same wide receivers. Obviously, we had some undrafted rookies in there like Austin Mack. You saw players like C.J. Board in there. You saw players like Dante Pettis. But we were 31st in the league, only next to the Jets at 32. And that is horrible, man. Oh my God, that is horrible. And that has to improve. If the Giants want to be competitive going forward, they have to improve on the offensive side of the ball. Get some playmakers, change the scheme up a little bit, but not too much for Daniel Jones. I understand that, this was going to be his 3rd scheme that he was learning in 3 years, considering the fact of his last year in college. But, the offense, no excuses for Joe Judge. It has to improve. You saw down the stretch again, we were scoring 6 points and that wasn't getting it done. And, Joe Judge has to be held accountable for that. Now, in 2019, our defense was trash. Oh my God. You guys remember that. We were 26th overall. We were 20th against the run, 28th versus the pass. Now in 2018, the Giants finished 24th. Overall, we had the 21st against the run, 23rd against the pass. But this year, under Patrick Graham, for the first time, since 2016, we had a top 10 defense. Now, this defense, without a solid edge rusher, without having a solidified number 2 corner and some linebacker help, was able to get to the quarterback, was able to prevent big explosive plays down the field. They were able to hold their own against some of the best offenses in the league. And you gotta give credit to Joe Judge for having these players ready week in and week out. These weren't no all-star players. They weren't. We had some late round talent playing and holding their own, and they did great. Granted, they could be better, obviously, because we were 6-10, but I think that going into next year, the experience, not just for the defense, but on the offensive side of the ball for these rookies, and players that usually wouldn't get time for playing. I think it's only going to help them going into next season. I think that we will see a better product on the field. Now, the Giants had 81 penalties in 2020 while having 90 penalties in 2019. Now, if you guys remember in the offseason, Joe Judge was scrutinized by the media for having his players practicing with tennis balls taped to their hands. He stated that that was to help them improve on holding and help them improve on having less pass interference calls. And you saw that translate very well despite the criticism. And honestly, I got to give a lot of credit to Joe Judge. I know that's very high school-esque. I know that's very college-esque as well. And that's why people were, complaining about it. They were saying that, he was being too militant. He was being too hard on his players. Look, these players get paid a lot of money. They get paid to literally hit grown men in the chest. So you can be hard on your players. Your players will accept it. Obviously, these are younger players, so, there's a lot more you can get away with as opposed to veteran players. But I don't think that was really the case with Joe Judge. I don't think he was a Matt Patricia-like coach. I thought that, the players loved playing for Joe Judge. You heard great things coming out of James Bradbury, Logan Ryan, Blake Martinez, Daniel Jones, and Saquon, that Joe Judge is a likable coach. He plays for his guys. He loves his guys. He fights for his guys, and they do the same for him. And you saw that translate on the field. So I'm very excited to where the New York Giants are headed towards. I think that this team can actually win the division next year. Yes, even with Dallas bringing back Dak Prescott, even with that good defense down in Washington, I think that this Giants team will be competitive. We did great in terms of the division. Obviously we should have won that game against Dallas and Philly. We can go back and forward with that, but I thought overall, beating Philadelphia and Dallas is definitely something that you have to give Joe Judge credit for. And for that, I would love to give him an A for that. Now, my overall grade that I'm going to give Joe Judge is going to be a B plus, considering the fact that yes, we did go 6-10, considering the fact that there were strides. You saw this team take steps back. Granted, I also want to give that more towards, this team being young and learning how to win and learning how to play with each other. So I get that. It wasn't a perfect season, but I got to give a lot of credit to Joe Judge for what he's building here. I think that we're seeing a competitive team and a team that, like he said, is representing the New York area. And I'm very excited with the work that he's done. And I think that all Giants fans should be excited. Now we're going to see what's going to happen with Jason Garrett. We're going to see what's happened in the offseason. We're going to have some videos talking about that. But let me know your thoughts below. What is your grade on Joe Judge in his first year as our head coach? Did you like the signing? Did you like any of his free agent moves? What are some free agent moves that you're looking at? Let us know below. Again, thank you so much for stopping by. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and we'll see you guys in the next video.